that you get to look at, and I sort of been able to develop an appreciation for the similarities and the differences. And actually, very exciting right now in geology. These contractional worlds are great from a geology standpoint. Everything getting shorter and deeper, and they're also the biggest petroleum engine on the planet. And we'll get into why that is. The thing that has been exciting in the last few years is a lot of the new tools coming about. A lot of isotopic tools. We're getting to absolute rates of different kinds of heating of upper cooling. And we now are starting to link them together and look at these as systems. And an event happening on one side, what's the response? Something happens on the trench, what's the response way out in the floor? And that's really emerging. Now, we used to knew there was a link, but now you can actually start to put quantified numbers on it. This is just that. What's the rate of the rise of the entities versus the substance? And petroleum just sits in there as the best auditor we have in geoscience of sort of these low temperature systems. Certain things have to happen in the right order for accumulations to occur. And that's kind of been the fun of my career, is you have to put all that together to work out the whole story, and here's the petroleum, why is it there, and why is it there. Today, what I'm going to do is just kind of compare probably one of the better known ones, the western U.S., which is the Rocky Mountains to the coast. It's a big system. It's mostly been exhumed. So you get down into the core, got some things superimposed on them. But at one time, it was very similar to the present day Ecuador, with a nice simple arc trench system and a retro arc base. And so looking at these two and compare and contrast, that kind of helps a lot to just kind of learn what the different themes are and what dominates. And that's what we'll try and do here, is look at really this system and this, and compare and see how they are similar and how they're different to the way the petroleum is. And with that, kind of the punchline on the petroleum is, the Oriente is an active system, but 4D is very shallow. There's not an active kitchen. We're not making oil right now, right in front of the 4D, right in front of the threshold, which is a bit of a puzzle, but that's the way it is. And to understand it, you got to kind of understand what happened before, the step before the present day. And if you look at the Sevier, which is an old kind of composite formula, because things had a number of processes in addition to the shortening one, and its is now mostly exhumed. We've uplifted the whole foreland and kind of taken off the top, and we get to look into the core. But at one time, these two were essentially the same in the gross of time. And that all that's left now in the western U.S. is kind of the remnants of what was once probably a super system, petroleum-wise equivalent to the Middle East. If it had another event on it, it really takes off 2 or 3 kilometers and strips it out. And all that's left over is sort of this unconventional stuff. The rock, the oil is still left in the source rock, which is what's been happening now. But in the first order, just looking at them, the dark here is the western U.S. Here's Ecuador. Ecuador is a classic trench arc and a basin. Well, the foreland basin, I'm going to use the term retro arc basin, but it's a basin behind the orogenic system. The western U.S. now, is uplifted, but at one time it looked very much like this. And we're going to step back through the history of them both and compare them. And the biggest difference is here's sea level. Is the western U.S. We're up at 2 kilometers plus. There's been another 2 kilometers removed. But if we look, this is where they overlap. There's this sort of Cordillera orogenic system, which is this, we're subducting an ocean on one side, and here we're actually destroying crust also. And this is this is what I mean by the orogenic system, where we're starting to get absolute rates and starting to constrain these rates of subduction, rates of uplift, rates of erosion. And they both have these systems. And here's what I mean by the big basin on the back. And this is the big oil engine. Most, or probably half the oil in the world has come out of these types of settings. And we'll get into why that happens, but it's basically all the things in the system naturally happen, so you can make petroleum. And the bad thing is the system's moving, it also destroys it. That's what's kind of unique about these foreland basins is it's a conveyor belt, and this whole thing is going down. So it makes great systems and destroys them and keeps moving. So in the western US, we're heating up like 1,000 kilometers. I don't know what the number is here in Ecuador, it's probably nowhere but a few hundred. There's how much has been subducted down, or from the Kraton side. But you can track it back because the record is up in here, and the record is also out in the basin. This is the beauty of these also. Everything that happens here is recorded out in the basin. As long as you have parts of that basin left, put the two back together. Just some terminology. These are the words. There's the arc back here. There's a frontal thrust, and this is the foreland basin. It's got a characteristic shape. It's deep, and it comes up to a shallow, and sometimes there's even a bulge in the back. And it's primarily a crustal process. Basically, it's, you know, there's a diving board, there's a beam, put a load on it, the origin, and it bends down. And these are some of the numbers you can actually calculate the load, and from the stratigraphy, you can even get an idea of how quickly it moves. So to the point that's here, as it moves, eventually ends up down there as the system rolls in. And we can track that through the stratigraphy. And a nice way to think of it, if you think of a point here, and through time, you just make a simple time depth curve, you look at a little bit of accumulation, a lot, and then pile its way up in the air and gone. You know, this would be a typical foreland basin. Here we're far distal, and then start to accelerate, go down into the 4 deep, and it comes back up again. That's a classic signal. We see that all over the world in these systems. And this is the rate here is sort of the speedometer of how fast the system is moving. So we take a brief primer on petroleum systems, which is within big orogenic systems, there's petroleum. And a nice way to think of it is kind of 5 elements. There's a source rock, or a rocus madre, organic rich rock, shale usually, or mudstones. Deposit usually get a lot of accommodation space and limited amount of sediments. The reservoir rock, which is just a porous, permeable rock. Sandstones are among the best. Carbonates are also good. Then a seal is a non-permeable rock. It could be a shale that does not have the organic rich. Evaporites are good seals. Those are kind of the static elements, so it's really your depositional system. And then the more dynamic parts that change a lot through time is the trap, which is forming the rock into a geometry that will prevent the hydrocarbons from getting out. And then there's your maturation and migration. You've got to heat up the source rock, get it hot enough to convert the organics to liquid hydrocarbons or gas, and then those migrate into your trap. So if we go back here to our curve, nice is this time here of rapid substance, you make a lot of space. It's a good time for source rocks. It seals as the thrust front approaches, you can get the plastics rocks. You generally get a nice sandwich of layered source reservoir seal genetically within the system. And then this is making traps. And if I get my source rock down around 100 degrees, 2 kilometers, it'll start to convert. So the key is you have to have these elements, but they also have to come together in space and time. So in an ideal system, this is time, and these are just the elements. I deposit the source rock, a reservoir, I put on a seal, it gets better, the seal gets better if you vary the depth to hold the column. So it starts and gets better. I make a trap, and then I generate go up. That's the ideal system, and then here's happy time where I've got everything going and I can charge it and preserve it. That's sort of the perfect system. We'll look at these two, and they have elements of this, but there's more complexity because the system moves. It sets up, and then that gets destroyed, and it shoots onto another one. With that as a context, a quick look at the western U.S. And here it is, and here's the old trench. Here's our arc, and then from here to here, this is called the base of the range, which is where it's all been extended. It's 2 or 3 times the width it was when it was originally formed. And this is postdates the Cordilleran time. And it's extended, and the thrust front is over here. And now, out here in the foreland, there's big uplifts. This foreland has been dismembered. There's these big structures out in front, which is nice, except from a petroleum standpoint, except they've also had the tops taken off of them. And originally, this was probably like Ecuador, this was all down near sea level. The whole thing's come up and it's been ignored. The question is, how did this get there? What's the whole system like through time? These are simple cartoons. Some people call me a tectonic, which I draw these diagrams and try to communicate concepts. And we try to do it quantitatively with seismic and everything, and then try to put numbers on it. But you have to start with the idea. And actually, from unraveling the rocks originally, late Cretaceous, it was very much like Ecuador. We had a trench, we had a very deep 3, 4, 5 kilometers, and a nice foreland section. And before there was even a passive margin, and this is deep enough to be generating oil. Not a lot of traps out in front, but a big deep foreland. Late in the process, after that, this keeps going. Then we also have a lot of deposition way out in the basin, and this is a different process in the city because we still have this flexural process going on, but something else is pulling us down, and it's on 1,000-kilometer wavelength. And that is something deeper and bigger, and probably lithosphere. It's a composite foreland with a flexural basin and this other ionic substance, which is really sexy petroleum-wise because it takes my whole foreland and starts to bring this generative area way out into the basin. Now I have an extra load. And it gets even bigger, and then we have some of these structures out in the deep basin that actually come up, and they're big. In Ecuador, there's some out in the foreland, but they're really relatively small. Most forelands are really boring. They're nice railroad track. And from a petroleum standpoint, it's a little bump out in front that's exciting. And the western U.S. is giant. And generative troughs on either side. So it was a really good setup, and about 2 or 3 kilometers of more section on top. Unfortunately, I marked the whole area uplifted, and then you've had, actually, we've just learned now, really, in the last 10 million years. It's been very recent, the exhumation. That's some of these quantified numbers with thermocline that have stripped off the top and left you with all that's left petroleum-wise, are just really the source rock, or the big thing left is the source rock that didn't expel up. That's the unconventional redoing tracking. There's a super duper system. We cut off the top, and now just a little bit left. So if we look at it through time, it started shaped like this. It goes up, and then you can see up at the top, the center of the basin, it shifted its way out. Composite that all together. This is a composite section. Early, here's the flexural part, and the center is over in here. You can see our different sands making our nice sandwiches. And then later, the big depot center is far from the thrust. put a big load on this foreland and made a nice system. So this would be back in behind the thrust front. That's up and gone, but it went through the oil window and made an accumulation or generated oil. But out in the foreland, we had this substance, which was some of the foreland substance, but this other deeper substance was that second process, which is fundamentally different than what you see in Ecuador or most flexible basins. And this other deeper pulse gives you a big generative area way out in the basin. So if you look at a map wise, here's that timing chart again, and this is sort of the Sevier story. A nice source, a reservoir, seal, traps. This would be generation within the fold belt, right at the 4D flexible generation. But then there's also big generation out in the foreland. We're making all these traps. We got about 50 million years of happy time. I got everything working and the whole system's coming together. But then there at the end, at the top is cut off. And a lot of the accumulations, we've eroded in these things down to basement. And in some of the lows, we preserved some of this source rock. It still has some hydrocarbon left in it that it didn't leave out and they're going in. Unconventional, the big deal in the US is where you actually go in and you turn this source rock into a reservoir. And it's very expensive. And it doesn't compete with $30 oil very well. So just some examples. This is the thrust front. You can see there's growth on this. This is an older structure. And then back here on this side, you can see the younger feature that's out in the foreland. And if you look for a time depth curve here, right in front of the thrust front, that's the one we were just looking at. That's what would happen right in front, and the other one would be right behind. So if you look at it quickly in map view, there's the thrust front, the green is the kitchen. That's the area that's generating the hydrocarbon. It's right there in the 4D. Deepest part just before it gets up. And then the next stage, that is kind of shut down, and way out here, I expect, now there's generation way out in the foreland. And it keeps going. These structures come up, and now I've got these big areas to focus migration bordered by generative area. And that made it a super system. And the next thing that happened was we erode all the way down, actually eroding down, in some cases down into the old kitchens. When you take out 2-3 kilometers. So that was that system, super system, but then it gets exhumed. We compare that, it's a one-time super, late, pop is cut off. You look at the Oriente, the image today and that late Cretaceous picture essentially were the same. The difference is right now, the 4D was only about 2 kilometers. But today, it's not generating. And the question is, where's the hydrocarbons coming from? And a lot of people like to invoke the deep hole down in Peru, but there's some arches and problems with timing with that. Peru's more of a gas source, we've got lots of oil. If you take the same approach there, you'll realize that here it is, this isn't 2 kilometers today, but the rocks up here, some of them are down to 50, the same source rocks. So you use that approach here, and you look back to time. This is my bio. But it started as a passive margin, and then it breaks up in the middle of the Cretaceous by the end of the middle of the Mesozoic. By the end of the Mesozoic, it's a passive margin again. And the key time we're going to look at is that Cenozoic, we've got this progressive 4D. And that's one of my techno tunes. But the key time is this phase here, where we've got this encroaching 4D, but it's marching forward. And at the end, it actually uplifts the old 4D. But we'll focus in on those last three. So at the end of the Cretaceous, it's our nice passive margin. And what's key about that is it's also depositing the great reservoir rock and the ruckus modern. I like that term. Source rock. mother rock. It's the organic rich rock. And we use the term the keto kitchen. A lot of the hydrocarbons that are out in the Oriente were probably generated in a ore deep that was near Quito, where Quito is today. And you can see it when you look at the timing of the accumulation. So the story for the Oriente is the kitchen now is up in the air. And a lot of our accumulations are preserved from there. You have to look in detail at your track relative to that kitchen to figure out what's going to be there. And that's why it's a just right system. You got to hit things that are there at the right time. If it's there too early and getting oil, the big problem out here is oil quality. Oil will come up and it'll get biodegraded. You're less than anywhere from half a kilometer to a kilometer. And if you're there too late, there's no oil coming in. There's a narrow window that's just right. What happens at the end of the Cretaceous is we get our source in the reservoir. So it's a passive margin. There's some terrain offshore that docks later. How far away? I don't know, but it ends up in the Andes. But you get a nice shale deposit in here, and these are the Oriente sands, Cretaceous sands. This is an even better system because you've got a source in the reservoir even before I put this fluctual basin on top. What's nice about those is they go all the way across the system.
What are the Cretaceous after?
These are Cretaceous after. Yeah, I did some field work out here in the 90s. Yes, so this would be a source rock. This is, I forget the name of it, but it's a late Cretaceous natural shale equivalent. Super, got to 15% TOC in places. World-class source rock, like the Laguna, same thing up into Colombia. And it's one of the good reservoir sands. Shallow grade sand. That's the Punta Real reservoir. The heavy oils down in the first place. So then we start to shorten this system. And in the Paleocene, Eocene, we dock the terrain. There's this plastic wedge in 4 deep of the Tena section, and that turns on this keto kitchen. That starts to vary at least 3 kilometers. It's your first oil generating. And we've got some of our first traps out in the foreland. You can see them grow. And a lot of this is from the side where you can track those things. And I'll show some examples.
So just a quick question. The fact that you have this deep subsidence means that there was time on it.
Yes, there probably was. Yes, and we have no control on that. What we have is the evidence of the now metamorphosed graphitic shifts. The elevation is far around the Venus. Not like we can do in the alpha climb where we can track it.
We've been having quite a debate about what the high elevation was.
Yeah, and there would be the implication. There had to be something. My holes are deep. My hole is deep. My hill has to be deep. But this would be a check. This is exciting. We can actually do paleo. This is the way I always think of it. Is the basin's my recorder. And that steep subsidence curve is I'm in a flexible basin, which means I gotta have this load that's moving on. And that's a global system of how these things work. And I think now we can actually tie it together. I think we can even go back to rates of subsidence and rates of shortening and some places like the modern Andes where brine is working. I can look at brine. We're starting to connect. Every little bump on those curves is telling the substance. Yeah, so here's where we were, and now we're starting it, and we're showing here in green, this is sort of the keto kitchen, and there's that load coming on. We've got a couple of traps forming, and this is good because there's a kitchen going, but some of these traps way out here in the basin, there's not very much section on top. Which means and you can get bacteria in your biodegraded oil. So they come in as a nice light oil, but by the time it gets into the reservoir, it's only a few hundred meters down. The bacteria will eat it up and it accumulates as a heavy oil. which is a lot harder to move and transport. But close in, you're probably, there's another dynamic element in this petroleum system, which is biodegradation, which changes through time depending on exactly where we live. And then we go to the Eocene, it marches forward. There's another dump of this Hayaku load, which is basically just like stepping forward to still a nice formal system. And the keto kitchen gets bigger, part of it gets uplifted, part of it grows, and some more of our structures are growing. Oops. So now let's move forward. Actually, the parts of the source rock that are back here are now so deep, you can actually see they're graphitic schists that you can see in the bottom. So it's gone all the way from oil to gas to graphite, I guess, maybe down in. It's pretty, you have to take it right off the paper. But we're making more, it's that same signal again, just repeating. Things change in the Miocene. We get, looks like there's accelerated subduction. The major Andes uplifts happen. And the keto kitchen, the casino keto is uplifted. But the 40 is not that deep. And I'm not sure why. That's another question out there. That's what you see is the progression has gotten more complicated.
Well, why do you say that the major Indian uplift happened there? As opposed to the question I was just asking.
Of when? I guess it's because the amount of uplift in the foothills is more. We have no thin-skin terrestrial left. It's all more deep-hole basement stuff. I think I may be, it's not, I don't mean to imply it's a major elevation gain, but the structural relief at the mountain front is bigger, I think. And that's more driven by the idea, because it's all, we do not have a thin-skin terrestrial in front of us. The thin-skin terrestrial is now eroded all the way down into the basement. And we got this uplifted foreland or foothills area. It's different in that the now I'll show you when you look at the size of it. It's a very different mountain front. So the style is different. I don't know for sure details of elevation gain. The structural relief at the frontal section of the fold belt is higher, and I would like to see the elevation evolution. But it changes from the period before. And there's also a major reactivation of the structures. And I guess what I mean is here is just we go straight into the basement on what look like the low angle thrust, and our foothills are just these high angle things. We don't have the classic thin thrust sheet like we see to the south into Peru and I suspect that may have something to do with the fact that the 4D is not very deep. That's still a fundamental question. Both, why is it kind of high uplift vertical right at the front, and why is our 4D not that deep? I mean, the one explanation is the 4D isn't deep because the load is not as big, which is one way to do it. I suspect that. The other thing is we may have some other dynamic processes going on, like we do at the end in the Sevier. They're coming down. But it is different. And it makes a big difference. You know, if we look at our, so these are the last three phases. Nice foreland, and here, kitchen shut off, and like in the foothills, we've got a little bit of exhumed kitchen. You want to think about the unconventional potential is only here. You know, it wasn't like in the Sevier, it was all the way up the basement. This stuff has never gotten deep enough. So you could go down there and frack it, but it wouldn't have made oil. It'd still be low-grade paraffin. So we'll look at a couple of variable history curves from here, then moving out. So for the keto kitchen, it comes down, it goes down, I guess it goes to 4 kilometers, it goes something deeper than 4 kilometers. It's uplifting sometime in the evening that's moving forward. Here it is the oil window. We've got a few features out in the foreground. If they're too shallow, they're getting biodegraded. Then we go over to right up near the mountain front today. Similar style, but it happened much younger, so it's swept further. The mountain front here it's a steep basement wall. Now, one in the Sevier, there's that low angle thrust and the whole big system. There's still very little shortening here, but lots of uplift. Any source rocks up in there are shut off. That's sort of the edge of the keto kitchen. Over here, it's never gotten to 2 kilometers. It's never turned on. And very little growth section, so it's fairly easy. That's the way you time these, is you look for growth section in this side. The overlapping section that thins over the structure. And so if you look at a burial history curve here in the modern 40s, it never gets there. If you're coming out here and 100 years ago, you wouldn't want to go into a basin. That's as deep as you get. You say, oh, it doesn't generate. But you have to look back at the history of the whole thing. Then you had the seeps and other accumulations out in the foreland. The question is, how did we get those if this is what's happening? Because right behind it was. If you look in the, so these are some of the features out in this one. You see a little pink high up over line, that's the growth section. So this guy's forming fairly late in the whole pile. A little bit of growth up there. And he may be too late, but there's no more oil being generated. So it's a nice structure. We're reactivating an old feature in the basement. Nice gentle roll, but this one's too wet. Then you look at these two. Here's one here, you can see there's a little growth above it. It's fairly early it forms. And there's a kitchen behind here, but it's not very deep when there's a structure there, so this one is biodegraded. Could be. For this one here, it's forming later, it could be just right. It's forming where it's still deep enough to not be biodegraded. The kitchen is still going, and this could be a just right kitchen. That's the narrow window here is finding light oil, high value oil, and the foreland is the just, and there can still be hidden features out in the Oriente that are similar to this. So we've got these two, they kind of look the same, but in a drawing timing system, they're very different. That's still the opportunity that remains out in the Oriente, looking for some of these just right features. So if we go through the same kind of cartoon diagram, there's the thrust front, there's our keto kitchen. These are some of our structures growing. The big one is sort of apple high that breaks up and then eventually becomes cooler after. It looks like it made a girl. But we don't have a preserved growth section. This is where some thermal crime could actually come back and say, yeah, this thing starts up looking 50 million years ago. And the detail breaks. But I assumed it was there early. And then it moves forward, it's still there. From the seismic mapping, there's some of the structures are active at that time. The ones that show up are the ones that are moving. So that's still a good, happy time. And you go one more. We've still got it. A couple of structures out there are active. These are really good because these now are probably deep enough and we're below biodegradation. Early on, there's a bigger risk. And then you step in the last phase, this is shut down. Now this kitchen is actually brought up to drillable depths. And there's a bunch of structures that are growing up only young, And those are really high risk. Because there's nothing to charge them except for maybe oil that's spilling out of another accumulation. We shut off. Kind of there is just right time. We're buried the deepest and our kitchen is still going. So if you put that in this time chart, you know, a nice source, reservoirs, a couple of reservoirs, seal. Here's those keto kitchen, we've got some traps, but here's the slow advantage of biodegradation. The early ones, it's good, but they're not deep enough. That risk of getting degraded is high. That decreases through time as it gets deeper, so the happy time is really just that little short interval. And then at the end, keto kitchen uplifts, it shuts off the young traps. And some of the young traps are even reactivated features and maybe moving some back up into the oil or into biodegradation, especially the features in the foothills. And maybe the Pooh River soil. I don't know whether it happened here or up there, those heavy oils down in the foothills. But if we looked at the oils, you could tell, and then if you did some other research, it would make a difference on how you would expect it to be distributed. So the Oriente is different, and it doesn't have an active system, petroleum system. And the traps you're looking for, you know, you're looking for these just right zones. The features, you've got to evaluate each one and the details of it. And the unconventional, you know, is limited to just kind of that foothills area. Not like that Sevier, where you've got hundreds of square kilometers of this unconventional source rock that hasn't expelled oil. So if you look at the two, sort of side by side, they share some elements. And they're both the Sevier margin. The Oriente, we're looking for just right. Bypass, there might be some features that have been offset. One's been drilled, oh, that's heavy oil. But that might be a young feature, and I've got a just right feature next to it. It takes that detailed timing analysis, limited, unconventional in the foothills. The Sevier, so it's the conventional is primarily gone. The features left have been discovered and developed. Huge unconventional, you know, but that's very price sensitive. It's all really in big trouble right now. But it's this process of this genetic analysis. How did this thing evolve? And I think there are a number of things to roll back on, implications of elevation and you can't get a high Andes if you're in a belt that erodes it all off, like in southern Argentina. And those linkages. And here's, you know, a context to order to audit these systems. And I guess the exciting thing in geology science now is we're getting some numbers on this. And there are some global themes you can show to these structural basins, what should happen from one part of the system to another. So that's kind of a quick shoot through. Any questions, or I'll be around all day if you want some more clarity. I know there's a lot of geology in terms of here. I'll be shot by, but I think that the net is comparing similar but different systems. There's a lot to learn, and both for evaluating you know, what remains a resource, and knowing what we have that is our energy source of today. Assessing what we have is key, and then so we move to something else. But also, just as an auditor of tectonics and the whole, you know, these accumulations only happen if a number of things happen in a relatively narrow window of probabilities. And using that again to evaluate these whole orogenic systems is just another tool. And it's because of the data sets you got to roll in, and the big opportunity is, you know, back to mine. You know, my world, the petroleum world, is focused out here on the basin. So I work this collaborative between ExxonMobil and the University of Arizona, and kind of, we had this figure, and Arizona had these great big mountains and these tiny little basins. And Exxon had these figures who hit these big basins who hit the mountain line. It didn't matter. And the opportunity that was exciting for me is putting these two data sets together to look for these, you know, the whole system. Rates of substance versus rates of thrusting. And the nice thing here is this records everything that's happened if you can tease it out. Let's get a very quick run through the comparison between the two. Now that I've graduated and on to whatever our next 5 phases, kind of what I've been involved in is working with some people and comparing these profiles around the world. And making
Somebody may have questions. I have a general question. You know, we've got this diving board model, this idea you have the Andes all up and down the west coast of South America. And that's supposed to have a 4-land basin and a 4 deep and a 4 balls and da. However, if you look up and down the Andes, there are very few of these places that are actually active 4-land basins. I think that there's a bit of an overstepping, over-assumption of the way this model actually works or doesn't work. And I'm just curious what you think about that.
I think that class model is a model, and by definition is wrong. I think the general trends are there enough that if you are not seeing some of the things in there, it means something is different. And one of the key things that is different is we never had a diving board. A crust that's coming in is very heterogeneous. There's changes in it, there's original pre-existing structural weaknesses. And what we learned is those pre-existing anisotropy dominate what happened. And if it's extra buoyant, or I think the Western US is a classic example. That is in one of the most deformed forelands that are out there, even without the glass step. I think it's because that was all broken down. All those things are reactivated previously. And that's what you look at. When you move off that curve, there's a reason. I think the thing that is universal is they move. If you look out into time, this thing, there's been a lot of crust that's been destroyed. The forward responses, I think, are variable. 4 bulges, think a lot about 4 bulges, I think that's overplayed. That's only you kind of have a unique set. The relief, this 4 bulges, the numbers guys come in and the 4 bulge is always there, and its scale is small.
Where is the perfect system today that matches the model?
I have to, you could ask Pete and Paul. The one I believe, Northern Argentina, it's cool because you can track for about 600 kilometers. You can see the 4 bulge deposits in the Alpha Plano. So you can actually track that one across
Northern Argentina, where's the 4-land basin?
It's right there. Now it's overfilled.
Oh, okay.
It's overfilled.
So
yeah, most of them
not actively deposited 4-land basin.
No, most of them are overfilled.
Yeah,
the Western US, and then it gets down to marine levels. You know, it actually has a marine section through most of the 4D. But a lot of the Indies is all overfilled.
There's about 3 places where you can say that there's.
Well, if you get into the subtleties, like the stuff that Andy Cohen's doing, you can see in the lakes, there is more accommodation at the front. When you get your lakes in the 40th area and they get thinner, there's an area that's actually inside. But you're talking years, kind of really. It's not there's high accommodation. It's a yin yang. It's high accommodation, but there's high sediments. In the Western U.S., in the Cretaceous, actually space feet, there was more substance in sediments. And that is actually unusual. Most of them, they end up overfilling. And most of the ones I looked at, that is the more common low in the centers of it. I don't know so much. But you still have that shape of the basin. If you look at the accommodation curve, there's still more as 40.
One thing, my point here is that if you look at the modern Oriente basin, the Andes today, yeah, there's a lot of places that have a lot of thick sediment. There's no places that have modern sediment. There's a few exceptions. The Pescazo Pan, I think. The Chaco is another one. Yeah, I don't know about where you kind of Oriente is. But basically, there's very few places where there's sediment accumulating to make that thick tile sediment. That's in the model.
Yeah, so a lot of it's bypassed. A lot of it's, I mean, on the Amazon, it's in the Amazon, it's in the, that was the discussion we were having, is the Amazon, it's still a recorder. It's a recording, it's all bypassed. And it's out here. Yeah. That's why I'd like to look. The reason for the Amazon is actually it's very well mapped. And we have all these times of high sediment and low. But yeah, that would be a good thing. I'm sorry.
Oh.
We are organizing a fieldwork of the geology and biology team, we have the students, and we are going to visit the school. We are here with the and I have a question about the reactor. The petroleum is located on that's why but moving north, you don't find the heavy or liquid kind of gases coming. Lighter heavier. I'm moving to Colombia, also you can find this I think is the Magdalena.
Oh yeah, that's up in the mountains.
Exactly, and a lot of micro and seeds coming from there and then working. All these areas, although again, she has some relationships, Colombia.
I think it's different. And I don't know the Comparative, we go under the volcanoes. And it gets hidden. But it's different when you go to Colombia. Colombia is more like Sevier, there's an instant fold up there. And whereas here, where our foothills are kind of eroded down, I think probably below that, and we preserve the deep part. So that there may have been Cusiana, but that's what's getting destroyed in that last phase. So this is kind of like your classic, you want to get into a thin thrust sheet, and we wrote down in here, we don't have that fold up. We're actually kind of like this cartoon. And then you're seeing down here, you don't preserve that. So as you look at Umariaku, it would be interesting to see. There's some techniques you do looking at fluid inclusions. We didn't have it in the 90s when I was there. So when hydrocarbons migrate through, cements are forming, and it will trap some of that hydrocarbon, and you can then get the quality of that oil that's coming through. And you can also get the temperature. And so from that, we can go back to my cartoon. I showed it as being early and then uplifting. But we didn't have that type of data. That's still inferred. My prediction would be you would see a light hydrocarbon, and you're going to be coming in at like 100 degrees. And then the modern one would be biodegraded. In some places, we can even track the temperatures. You'll get a fracture growing, and it'll capture the cements and the inclusions. You can actually track the temperature as it goes down. And then the crack keeps going, you can see it coming up. And then if you have other information on burial curves, you can put a time on it. It would be interesting to see, especially getting to where is the distribution. If it's all a late feature of young biodegradation, it'd be different. It's tied very much to present day shape. It's paleo, the tides, what's the shape, the time it came in? What was it shape 30 million years ago and 20 million years? As you develop, that would be, I think, an important part of assessing that resources, developing it rationally. How big is it? Where was it? How far down is it? That's my favorite outcome from the Oriente.
Yeah, I'm not always need for it because they were there, but I think the main minister of the problem in Ecuador is really to avoid information about
It's going to, I'm sure it's going to be hard. It's such a low value oil. And it's so expensive. Even the Canada stuff, right next to the market, pipeline, and all that already there is hurting. It's kind of a lot of the unconventional is very price sensitive.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to have you here. Thank you everybody for attending.
Just a little bit makes all this much more real. Fantastic way to keep everybody going.
Pusieron esa cosa y la cámara está ahí. Controla. No hay cómo bajarlo. No sé qué te ves.